Okay.
Recording, and let me start. This is our first lesson, our first meeting of our interesting conference that David and I, my name is Lev, with me David, we're in Beersheba, Israel, and we're starting maybe a little bit uh, unusual format. We've been studying Torah in different languages. We did it, we have a Russian studying group that David and I both members, and we basically study a very simple way, fundamentals. Many Russians, as you know, come to Israel or other places, like myself, initially growing up with no Torah at all, and they don't know is the 5 books of Moses or 55 books of Moses, and who is Moses, who is Aaron, and where was his Egypt. They don't know any of that. So our focus in those lessons is basically stay on just understand fundamentals. We don't go too much in philosophy. Sometimes we deviate and we have very interesting discussions. So we decided to switch, or David and I thought about to switch it to do a similar format in English. But in English, I think the audience generally, I'm just guessing, and we'll, as we go, we might update a little bit. The audience a little bit more knowledgeable typically in Torah than the Russian-speaking audience. So we decided to do it, instead of title it a guide for the perplexed, we want to call it maybe like perplexion for the guides, if you will, so that everything is open in terms of questions. Everybody is welcome, regardless of the degree of your religiosity or absent of, whether you're the Orthodox, a super duper Orthodox, or Karaite, or something in between, whatever it is, we're not going to hold you as a blasphemous, as long as you're interested and willing to have another opinion accepted, not as a dogma, but just another view, and interesting to find where another person or persons get their facts. They'll bring us in the road of very interesting, we feel, discussions and learning, and everybody will learn each other from each other, and hopefully it will help us ultimately to make a better world. So we hope. So today is Kislev 5782. The day is the 12th. It is 16th of November 2021. We are recording. The sessions are relatively short, 30-40 minutes. And what we decided to do, kind of start following similar format of our Russian Torahs. In Russian Torah, we'll follow a weekly parsha. Here, we'll start from Genesis, from Breshit, from Vitiyo in Russian, I would say. And we'll basically, our format, I will briefly just go over that, and we just open for the audience to have questions and thoughts and ideas. And the format will work itself out automatically over the sessions over time, hopefully. One thing we'll say at the beginning, if you think about in the world, there's approximately 15 million Jews, roughly. You can say 10 or 20. And what does it mean, the Jewish? How halachically the Jewish, not halachically. But to round the numbers, let's call 15 as a rough number. And the world is what, like 8 billion people, I guess, right? So if you take 15 million, I take my calculator and divide by 8 billion times 100, that's approximately like 0.2%. 0.2%. So for every 1,000 people in the world, 2 are Jewish. So that comes from there. You can say, is it good or bad? You know, because maybe what we hold is just, how can 2 people out of 1,000 be possibly right? We're just an overwhelmingly small minority. What do we know? When do we finally get it, how wrong we are? Another way to look into it, how strange the world is, that a small minority of people for 3,500 years, and we can debate even that number, has held certain rules of morality, if you will, how to behave. And 998 people felt, well, it's much better to conquer each other and take it by force. And what I say goes, and I'm the center of the world. And of course, I'm sure David will mention, and other people will mention, wait a second, the Jewish history wasn't exactly so rosy. We're not such angels either. We have our share of skeletons in the closet. So we'll talk about it. So basically, let's just go overall overview. So we have a Torah. And the basic of our religion, is it really religion, a culture?
Well, if I can, Lev, if I can add,
of course,
if I can add just a little bit,
please
a
do.
little bit to the structure of the way Judaism is today, as we know it. If for those who will watch this video and they don't know what's happening in the Jewish world, because like you said, only 2 people of 1,000 are Jews. So Judaism is basically built today in terms of the Jewish religion, not the Jewish nation. The Jewish religion is divided into 3 main groups. Okay, so one is the Orthodox group, which is the biggest and is the mainstream of Judaism. A second group is called Karaite Jews. And the third group are the Samaritans. Now, the Samaritans is an extremely small minority living here in Israel, and they are less than 1,000 people. It's like 2 villages, you know. And Orthodox Judaism there's a very, very big dispute going on about their relation to the Jewish nation. And I think that the mainstream thinking of Orthodox Judaism about Samaritans today is that they are basically Goyim. They're not Jews. And but with that said, there are some things that you can actually do, or services that you can actually get from a Samaritan. It's a very, very difficult, there's a very big difficulty for Orthodox Judaism to consider Samaritans and to bring them into Judaism for various different reasons in history. Orthodox Judaism is divided today into 4 groups, not 3. So the first one is Orthodoxy. The second one is the conservative movement. The third one is the Reform Judaism, reformist movement, which is basically more liberal than conservative. It's like, and the fourth group, which is I think the newest group in Orthodox rabbinical Judaism, is called Reconstructionist Judaism. They're not very much known, as far as I know. I think they are something like 60,000 people, mainly in the United States. And the conservative and Reform Judaism also are mainly American movements. The Reform Judaism was actually born in Germany, but developed became a big thing in the United States. The Karaite, now those 4 groups are what we call rabbinical Judaism, and they basically follow the Mishnah and the Talmud, which is oral law. The main thing in Orthodox Judaism is oral law, and the written Torah itself, which is the 5 books of Moses opening the Bible, is mainly I would say it's like it's an inspirational law. It's not. It's very interesting. We'll go into that. We'll go into that soon. But anyway, so that's rabbinical Judaism. That's Orthodox Judaism. The other group, which is Karaite Jews. Karaite Jews is also about 50,000 people today, most of which live in Israel, and I think another 10,000 live in the United States. Another very small group. But once Karaite Jews were almost half of the Jewish nation. So they were very big. It was half of the Jewish people 1,000 years ago. Almost half of the Jewish people was Karaite. And the difference between Karaite Jews and Orthodox Jews is that for the Karaites, this is the law. The written Torah, the 5 books of Moses, and all of the commandments in it for the Jews, the 613 Taryag mitzvot, is the law. And the Mishnah and the Talmud, the oral law, is unaccepted because it's a law that was designed and written by and discussed and written by people. Although according to this thing, but there's many additions. There's like the Talmud is like 70 volumes, and this is the and this is the for Karaite Jews, this is the law of God given by God. So they say, well, how can you basically how can you prefer how can you prefer the law of man instead of law of God that you've been given by God, and that you accept the idea that this is a God-given law? So there's a paradox there. So this is the main structure of Judaism today.
Very good. Thank you, David. Very, very enlightening. I will also add to your addition too that interesting that, of course, I am sure many who would listen or watching this tape. By the way, as a reminder, we do our classes by the Zoom every Tuesday, 8 o'clock by Israel time, or in the US, it'll be 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So please log in. And I don't need to give the coordinates. If you're watching this video, that means you got it. So, but I would say that Jewish history, I mean, according to the Judaism, and even then, not by every branch of Judaism, 6,000, roughly 6,000 years. Now it's 5,772. And a more traditional, as David mentioned, traditional classical belief, of course, that Moses, after almost, after the first 1,000 years, was the times of Noah, from Adam to Noah, and then from Noah, from Abraham and on to Egypt, exile, coming to Israel, the first temple, the second temple, the final exile that's been lasting almost for 2 years. That's our history. And of course, people can poke questions. Well, what about dinosaurs that were 15 billion years ago? How does it fit to 6,000 years? And people can say, well, the sun was created maybe on the fourth day or the third day, fifth day. Well, that's a quiz for next reading. So if the sun didn't exist on a day 1 or day 2, how long was that day? Maybe that was 15 billion years. So those type of questions is just a very simplistic note, and there's many more. So in a body of Judaism for the 6,000 years, or for 15 billion years, if you prefer, whichever number you'll take, or anything in between, there's a lot of information has been produced and given by God directly, or those who don't believe was given by God directly. It was written by people, but one way or another, it exists today. There's a Torah in different editions. David, being Israeli, reads it in Hebrew. I read it in Hebrew and English. Other people read it in other languages, in Russian, Polish, Arabic, you name it. But in addition to this relatively small book, there is also, David mentioned, oral Torah, which is a Mishnah. And most classical believe that Moses received it. And people can argue, if Moses spent 40 days on a mountain and then another 40 days on a mountain, what was he doing there? If he just went to get the Torah, it only takes 15 minutes, write the receipt, go back, see you later, shalom. If he does them 80 days, for 80 days he spoke about something, and that basic of that speaking interaction of God created the discussion, which eventually from oral tradition on and on through the prophets became what today is printed and we call it Talmud, which is a Mishnah and a Gemara combined together. And later on we'll be talking about it. But in addition, there's also Midrash, which is our classical, some people call it fairy tales, some people say canonical, historical discussions, whatever. There's a prophets, there's a kings, there's a chronicles, There are many, many books written. There's a Kabbalah, which is Jewish mysticism, and that by itself can be considered by some people not acceptable. And for some people, that's the only thing that is acceptable, and anything in between. So we're here not to knock out the errors for one another. We're here to learn. If people say Kabbalah, it's the only thing you really should study, what's the basis of their thinking? And people who are positive, what's the basis of their thinking? There's nothing wrong.
Yeah.
And
But there's one thing, and this is very important, is that although there's many different realms of thought in Judaism, like you said, I mean, the Midrash, for example, for some people, the Midrash is even more important than what the Torah says, because the Midrash sort of explains the Torah. It explains missing things that, or just things that are not really clear in the Torah. So it explains things, so it will be easier for people to understand what happened to that character. Why did it disappear? Or what exactly did that character say, which sounds very strange. So what does it really mean? Or why did he really say it, etc., etc. But the thing is that although the different realms of thought and philosophy, which is mind-boggling in its volume, there's one thing that unites Jews, and this is why the religion is basically united, and that is the commandments, the mitzvot. The Shabbat is Shabbat for all Jews. The morning prayer is a morning prayer for all Jews. The second prayer when the sun goes down is for all Jews. The mincha, or the second prayer for the Karaites, is almost the same. It's almost the same thing. The Kriyat Shema, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu. All Jews say that. Orthodox and Karaites and Samaritans, we all say Shema Yisrael. Pesach, Passover, is for all Jews, and all of the other holidays mentioned in the Pentateuch. So the commandments are the same for all Jews. Tabernacles, everything, Purim, everything is for all Jews, and that's what unites Jews as a religious people, is that we are commanded to do all those things. Now, what do we think about it? It's another thing.
Yes, very good point. Now I'll add now to that addition also personally. Now I think this personal aspect for me, I always was interested in fact in ancient history, in factual data, and I found, this is just my observation. Of course, I'm not a rabbi, and I'm sure many people who watch from the rabbinical community, which I have a greatest respect for, and I learn daily Torah, Talmud, with a rabbi and rabbis who I love dearly and greatly respect. So many of them will look at what we're saying now. Okay, let's turn it off and just do something else. It's a waste of time. These guys are doing something that Rambam, our great philosopher, will say, well, what is it? You can even question that Moses didn't write the Torah. Are you guys not? Click and just go to another page of Gemara. I have Sanhedrin page 17 to learn today. I don't want to listen to this to waste of time. Some people watching us will say, I never knew that. I don't even know what this Mishnah Torah, but it's interesting what Lev and Dave are talking about. We're just a regular people. We have both, Dave and I'm sure I speak for both of us, have a great respect for people who go to yeshiva and study this. And whether we agree with some things that they say or don't agree, that's not even the point. Everybody has, as David had, their own niche. We all fit together like a glove or Klal Israel. We just want to understand. I found also from my personal experience over the years that I would ask the question, even to rabbis, I rarely got the answer. And I have to say with very respect and humility, because it's almost like, people, rabbis, I guess, who call me, I guess not a heretic, but pilpul or pulpil, that something just, how many devils are dancing on a tip of the needle, is it 40 or 43 or 57? That's not my point. I remember one time I came to synagogue many years ago and I asked rabbis, I was overwhelmed with all the books sitting there. Some was there, that was in US, some was there in Hebrew, some were in English, or some Russian shells like that. I said, before I start doing anything, just give me like a little bit of an overview. What is it? And being an engineer myself, I like to be structured and logical. I thought that they will tell me, okay, this on the right, we have whole Hebrew stuff. On the left, it's kind of English literature. From that, there's basically, this is Torah, this is prayer books, this is Midrash, this is Gemara, this is this. And they didn't seem to be very interested to explain to me, basically, well, never mind that, just learn the basics before you get there. And I thought, I understand their point. Maybe I was asking like for 5 minutes table of context. I wasn't asking to spend like 2 years to explain to me all the books. I just give me an overview. I come to the store, which department is selling diapers? You know, where do I buy the car oil? Don't tell me just go there and start this and eventually get, why do you need a car oil for? Right, you're riding the bicycle. So why do you need a car oil? Just ride the bicycle. I don't own the car, perhaps, but I want to know where to buy a car oil. Just tell me. So, and when I was getting the answers, or what the answers for people who are becoming what we call batshuva, who people are not religious, but they're interested, they get involved. Maybe they listen to our recording and say, it's interesting. Maybe I go with David to the synagogue and tell me, what about all this stuff you're talking about? So they walk in, they wouldn't, kadosh, 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 why are you jumping? Is it a basketball game? What, why is they doing this? I feel very uncomfortable sitting there not knowing what to do. So can somebody explain? So I had troubles to listening to getting these explanations. And I've learned that the people who go through this process, many in my observations, had a very big tourist in it, very big problems in their lives. Because all of a sudden they become Batshuva, holier than thou. Now they know that you come on Shabbat from your home to the curb, to the mailbox, and you have to get the newspaper, that's muksa. You can't take newspaper. But if you do, you have to get it with your pinky that turned over this hand and move it with an elbow and move the legs in an unusual way, and you have to shovel like this. And I wonder what is going on here? That's all explained to me. I just becoming understanding the basic. They're already telling me, but if your mailbox more is 2 amot from the road or 5 feet from the road, then you do this. And if it's 7, it's like that. I said, just give me a break. Just explain to me. So I found that when we learn from the beginning, you have to learn slowly. Like if you tell somebody who wants to quit, not everybody who wants to quit smoking, just stop. Some people have power to do it, but most people, I smoke 2 packs a day. If they make it after 6 months to 1.5 packs, it's fine. Then another 3 months, one pack, maybe 10 cigarettes. If you do quit instantaneously, you probably get more damage to your body than you didn't do it at all. The same thing with religion. If you're doing it too quickly, you can be turned off because first of all, your family will say, this guy was just eating ham and Arby's hamburgers a year ago. And now he is walking with a black hat and the things and a payas, and he's telling everybody how much when you pray, you need to go left, right, center, not right, left, center. That's not correctly. I say, knock it off already. So it's very confusing. So what we're trying to kind of unconfuse this and give people answers. And if we don't have an answer, if Dave and I wouldn't have an answer, other people hopefully will have an answer. If they don't, maybe somebody from rabbinical group will help us out. Maybe, well, I don't care if they are Orthodox, whether they are Reformed, whether they're conservative, whether they're Karaites, whether they're Kohanim, Levites, or whoever, or non-religious at all. Any information that Talmud says, you learn from every person. For every person, you learn. And that's kind of the format, I think, of our group. And every session is very short, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, because we found that people don't have time to sit after working day for a long time and listening to Dave and Lev is telling him something, okay, let's go to eat. So 30 minutes, 40 minutes, if you're interested, with this recording, you'll listen and we'll continue on this. So Dave, back to you. Any comments on that comment? We'll be comment on top of the comment.
Well, I guess, as far, as what you said, I guess that most questions will be about rabbinical halacha, because rabbinical halacha is mainstream. Judaism, and of course conservatives and reforms and reconstructionist Jews, is actually rabbinical Judaism. It's just groups that are trying to somehow reform, change the form, or change traditions and conventions of Orthodox Judaism. But their leaders are called rabbis, and they are rabbis, and they have rabbinical schools like I think there's like the rabbinical college in New York, and these kinds of things, and so their basic notion of Judaism comes from the Talmud. So I think that most people, I mean, I've talked to people, and not a lot of people really know about the existence of Karaite Jews, and that there's Jews that pray differently, because Karaite prayers and Karaite synagogue and the traditions of how you pray, not just the content of the prayer and the structure of the prayer, but also how you pray. You say, you give shalom. So shalom, you'll go from the left to the right, to the right to the left. But it doesn't exist in Karaite prayer at all. So it's like Karaite Judaism is another, it's another version of Judaism. It's nothing at all like rabbinical Judaism. There is no the main prayer in rabbinical Judaism is Shmona Esrei, right?
Yeah.
Tfilat Shmona Esrei. We'll probably talk about that if somebody has questions. Tfilat Shmona Esrei doesn't exist in Karaite prayer. They don't have Shmona Esrei. Orthodox Jews do not prostrate. Karaites prostrate, like Muslims in the mosque. A Karaite synagogue. There's no chairs.
If I jump on this point, that's for example one interesting example. One time, maybe more than one time, I asked, why is it that we don't prostrate? And I think I may be wrong. The classical answer from rabbis typically would be, well, that's what the idol worshippers used to do, pagans in their temples. They had like a marble floor or someone floor, and they will prostrate. And once they do it, we don't do it. We used to do it many years ago, but once they start doing it, we don't want to follow tradition of non-Jews. Well, the counter opinion to that, I guess Karaites will say, why not? This is our tradition. If somebody decides to follow our tradition and they want to prostrate, why should I stop? So you can see the views from either standpoint, kind of, nobody has a wrong point to that, but they can have many different explanations why we do things the way we do.
Yes, I think that in the question of prostrating, it's not really what you said is kind of true, but it's not really true, because the Rambam Maimonides, he died 800 years ago, and in the Mishnah he wrote a very, very big book that is comprised of 14 volumes, and it's called Mishneh Torah. You probably are familiar with this. And in the Mishneh Torah, he actually writes that to pray properly, you need to prostrate. And so if the Rambam was prostrating 800 years ago, it means that somewhere along the line from 800 years ago until now, probably somewhere in the middle, that's not very long ago. Yes. It could be 400 years, it could be 300 years. For some reason, the big rabbis, the poskim, the poskei halacha, for some reason, they have decided to ban this this tradition. The Karaites just keep it.
Even though in our prayers we're saying, we're saying we prostrate. We say it in our prayers, yes, but we don't.
You're just saying it. You don't do it, right? And so because in the Tfilat Shmona Esrei, which is the main prayer of the Orthodox, of the rabbinical Judaism, in Tfilat Shmona Esrei, there's 3 prostrations. There's 3 places in the prayer that you should prostrate. That it's halachic prostration. You have to do it.
And we do some prostration more than usual on Yom Kippur, but it's still not
Yes.
prostration fully the way it used to be in an old day, so to speak.
Absolutely, that's right. So and people now say, well, how can I prostrate with tefillin, on my head? So because the tefillin is considered it's a very holy item. You don't want the tefillin to touch the floor.
I have an answer for
But
that.
actually, you have to prostrate.
I have an answer for that, and maybe put it on the light side. When you go to a massage therapist, when you lay in massage bed, there is a hole in the middle of the bed. You put your face into it.
Yes.
So if you really want to do it, is there a problem? You can make a pillow that will go around to fill in. The fill will fit the pillow and will not going to touch the floor. There is a will, there is a way. You can find a way.
And in the second temple, when they were after before or after, I don't remember. I think it's after the sacrifice, after the sheep or the goat was killed, was cut, and its blood was put in the basin, and then the parts of the animal were put on the altar. They said Shema Israel, right? They said Shema after the Shema Israel Adonai Eloheinu, and when they said Shema Israel, they not only prostrated, they really lay on the ground on their stomachs.
It's called like
with
eagle
their
style.
hands,
Eagle style.
with their hands,
Yeah.
right? And when they were on the floor, they were saying Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Leolam Va'ed.
Yeah.
And so prostration, we invented prostration. Everyone who prostrates has learned it from us.
We also invented Google. Didn't we invent Google too?
No, it was Sergey Brin and Larry Page.
Missed that one. Okay.
But we have to find some Jewish or maybe some Jewish roots in one of the.
I will
guys.
add to what you just. If I add to that something interesting, and I think David agree with me. And if he doesn't agree with me, that's okay too. But I think he will. Is interesting. The way I personally look at it is like that. There's a basic Torah material. God thoughts came out to us, whether it's written, whether it's oral, but that's a basic material. Then there is in rabbinical Judaism, as Dave mentioned, there's rabbinical interpretations that would say, let's say, for example, just make example, let's say I cannot get to, let's say Torah would say I can't get to this object for 10 feet or 10 meters. Rabbi would say, don't come close to 100 meters. In other words, they will make it, Torah doesn't say that, but if you don't say 10 meters, somebody comes to 11 meters and it's still okay. Next thing you know, it's not exactly 11, it's 9.9 and you're in violation. So they say, let's make it a little bit safe. But they didn't make it instead of 10 meters, 10,000 meters. It's not like you have to go like 2 towns away. So there's certain rabbinical decisions in order to make common sense. Those type of rabbinical decisions are usually not very intrusive. They're not something that all of a sudden, what does it say in the Torah? I have to worry about it. That's one way of rabbinical decisions. Then another way of rabbinical decision, which is classical Judaism, I would say rabbinical Judaism, Dave refers to it, analyze the Torah, analyze it to the point, Torah and oral Torah, to make Rabbi Ishmael's 13 rules of derivations. There are certain rules, and rules themselves also derive. That you can see the word in the word table in Breshit, in Bitiyo in Russian, or in creation, Breshit, that's Genesis. And you also see what the table, for example, in Shemot. Then you find what the table talks about. And if that table says that I have to put a glass, I'm just making it up just for illustration, I put a glass of water on the table. And somewhere else it says the table that they brought something was covered with gold. Then I derive that the glass must be surrounded with gold. So rabbis will make certain connection between different words and phrases to say how this relates to that. The very classical example, many times we spoke even in our Russian Torah class, that the classical situation, eye for an eye. The rabbis derive, it's not really a literal to gouge the eye out if you committed something. And if you do you do what if somebody lost half the eye? If you lose not 20% of your side, but 30, 40, how do you get a surgeon to exactly knock only at three-quarter of your eye and some? So
Yeah.
it's the point right now. We're not well, it's a problem, but the point is that different views and ways to interpret it at the financial compensations, and some people believe in that, some people don't, and some people anyway in between. So
Yeah.
there's a body of lots of things in Judaism, and we all Jews, and we all complement that by being in our diversity is our unity. And if we study each other's diversities and we partake the good side of each other, that probably, in my view, will bring the advent of Mashiach sooner. Mashiach probably sitting now and saying, when are you guys stop bickering with each other? Do I have to do everything? Do I have to come and
by myself? Do I have to do everything by myself?
Do I have everything by
Right.
myself? So we only after a very what we would consider common sense understanding, and that's what our objective. Back to you, David.
How much time do we have left?
We probably have, let's see. Usually, it's a miracle happens. Usually we have a 30 or 40 minutes on my Zoom. I purposely don't extend it for the reason but it didn't give me the warning notes of 10 minutes. We've been about 38 minutes. Usually at 40 minutes we'll cut us off. But since we have a couple of more, since the warning sign didn't come up, let's continue maybe for another 10 minutes or so.
Okay. So I think that we will, because it's okay, so it's just 10 minutes. I think it would be very interesting. Maybe people who listen to me, they say, okay, so who is David? Who is David? Is he rabbinical or Karaite? Or Karaite? So I would say Lev is rabbinical. Is rabbinical Jew. He follows the rabbinical tradition. So I was born into a non-Jewish, a non-religious family, and I just started, messing with Judaism just a couple of years ago, just 2 years ago, really just a little bit before the Corona pandemic started, and I started being interested in Judaism because of Professor Yeshayahu Leibowitz. He was, for those who don't know, a very, very, very famous Jewish philosopher. He had an extremely intelligent person. He died 27 years ago in 1994. And he was a very Orthodox Jew, very Orthodox rabbinical Jew. He had a big black yarmulke on his head, just like Lev. And he was an Ashkenazi Jew who was born in Riga, and he started in Berlin, and he came to Israel in the 1930s.
My wife's family is from Riga.
Well, so you see, maybe you are connected.
Maybe related.
Yeah, maybe. And he was a scientist. He was a medical doctor, and he was a doctor for neurobiology and chemistry and all sorts of things. He was a researcher of the human body, an anatomist, and a professor of philosophy. A very, very extremely intelligent person. And some people say that he was an atheist. Now, it's mind-boggling that an extremely Orthodox person, very Orthodox, I guess he did not miss a prayer in his life. Like 3 prayers every day, he's there. In Minyan, in the synagogue, not just in his room. He goes to the synagogue every day. How can such a person be an atheist? And I was like this, ripping my hair trying to understand Yeshayahu Leibowitz. And because of that, I started to understand Judaism. I started going to synagogue. I started, I relearned, I've relearned the prayers, how to put the tefillin. I was going to on Shabbat on Saturday morning. I was going to the synagogue to have to pray and to listen to the reading of the Torah. And on the just right here near my home in an Orthodox rabbinical synagogue. And but I also with time you think about stuff and you try to understand who what's going on, how is this religion built, what is the philosophy around it, and is it even possible for an atheist to be religious? And
Interesting
Yeshayahu
question.
Leibowitz, yeah. Okay, so I'm a religious atheist. Okay, what are you gonna do about it? What are you gonna do? I want to pray. I am an atheist who prays. Okay, I pray to God, and after that, I'm an atheist. Is that possible? Is that even possible? You know, and Yeshayahu Leibowitz is a proof that it's possible. And it's sort of it makes you sort of you can sort of fall in love again with Judaism and everything that Judaism and Jewish thought, not just Jewish life in terms of being religious, doing the prayers, doing the mitzvot, but even just reading the Bible, reading the Torah, and so trying to understand, is there something there that is true to life itself, even even if you don't believe that God is an entity that exists in objective reality.
And I would say, like, for me, I can relate a lot to what you're saying, David. And I always wondered, and that caused me a lot of problems in my life. And I think talking to other people sometimes, I find similarities that I want to know. I'm sure many other people. What's the whole purpose? Why am I here for? What's my mission? What's the purpose of life? I mean,
Yeah.
how important is to be Jewish? What's the difference if instead of Jewish, I will be Swedish or Norwegian? If I'm good Norwegian Christian, am I any better or worse than a good Christian, a good Jew? I mean, this is a question that I'm not afraid to say, but I know to many people, to many Jews will say, well, Chatzava Halila, God forbid you should say things like that. How you can even discuss it? Click and turn the TV off, when you're listening to it like this. David, to describe his background a little bit, I would say I was born in Russia. I left Russia at 25, obviously was knowing very little about Judaism. I hardly knew when I left Russia where exactly Israel. Is that Eastern Israel or Southern Israel? Is there such a thing as a Northern Jordan and a Southeastern Jordan? I didn't know, as most of the Russian Jews don't. There was an Iron Curtain, Stalin, Brezhnev. What do you know about it? I spent after 37 years in US, made Aliyah to Israel 4 years ago. But before that, I was coming to Israel for many, many years. My mother lived in Israel. I have some family in Israel. My mother passed away about 8 years ago. She's buried in Beersheba Cemetery. So I started to become, as David, more interested in more traditional Jewish things. Started going to synagogue initially just to learn theory, Talmud and Gemara, without praying. And then I was going to the synagogue and I was learning Talmud, and somebody told me, well, you're going every morning at 8:30 to learn Talmud for the last 6 months. Well, did you pray? I says, no, I don't really need to pray. I pray myself. I say, oh, thank God I'm here. I said, well, why don't you try to play Shachrit? So, and then we said, this guy is coming after Shachrit, learn for an hour Talmud, and then goes home. So I started, so I started to pray, and then little by little, I started to become a little bit more observant. I'm Shomer Shabbos. My wife and I, we observe Shabbat. We try to be good people. We try to be good Jews. We try to do what we can to other people, and we enjoy ourselves. I have more questions. One thing I have to say, in the last 20 years that I started to become more affiliated to Judaism, I probably quadrupled my knowledge of Judaism. I used to know 0.1%, and now I know 0.4%. So that's a great progress I made. Okay, so And I'm sure we will at some point, hopefully we'll be blessed, or more people will join us and listen to our recording if I find it interesting and help. Not even interested. Some people find it interesting. Some people will say completely repulsive and not interesting, waste of time. Some people will find they want to come in and comment and disagree or correct us. Some people want just offer opinion. It's fine. David and I fully open, we welcome. If a rabbi wants to come and tell us why my mother said what he said and why we don't see it in our darkness of our mind, we don't see the wisdom of Rashi. Well, we look forward for that person to open our minds, enlighten us. So we do see the wisdom of Rashi. We're open for that. We're not against it.
I'm going to speak about Rashi. I'm going to speak about Rashi in a minute, because I just wanted to say that about myself is that today, officially, I am right. I am rabbinical, because I was, born and was defined Jewish by rabbinical Judaism. I was circumcised by a rabbi, and I had the bar mitzvah, and but just recently I became, I think that the last 4 to 6 months, I became really more inclined to the Karaite form of Judaism, and I have problems. I have criticism. I have criticism of both ways, and I'm trying to find a third way, which will mend the problems of both rabbinical and Karaite Judaism, because I think both groups have mistakes. Now, I'm not trying to say, I'm not the Rambam. Maybe what I'm doing is, it's a personal project for me. I'm not the biggest genius in the world. I'm just David from Beersheba, but I'm really trying, I'm really digging deep. I have the Mishnah. I learned the Mishnah. I finished the tractate of Megillah today, Masechet Megillah. And
Mazel tov.
tomorrow,
Okay.
tomorrow,
Tomorrow,
I learn a chapter every day, just like they
Daf
do
Yomi?
in the yeshivot, right? In the Daf Yomi, right? It's my own Daf Yomi. I learn a chapter of the Mishnah every day, but I also have the book of the main halachic book of Karaite Jews, which is it's not 70 volumes. It's just one book, and it's called Aderet Eliyahu. And I also learn a few chapters of Aderet Eliyahu every day. So and I have criticism of both systems, because I think that both systems have made historical mistakes, and those mistakes can be mended. So I don't know if I'm rabbinical or I'm Karaite, but I do know that I do reject the Talmud as a thing that is mandatory, mandatory by God. I think that I personally find it more logical that this would be the book you should follow, and not the 70 volumes of rabbinical, thinking. Yeah. And conclusions. But that's me. So we can say that this conversation is between a classical rabbinical Jew and someone who is
maybe
looking for a way.
That's very good spoken. And then maybe we'll finish this lesson on a little story. I think I might have mentioned it in our Russian book. It's like
I also wanted to talk about the first sorry, Lev. I also want to talk about the first verse of the Torah. Right after, but you go ahead and you go ahead, and after that we'll do it.
All right. Yeah, I was gonna say that there's a joke when the guy dies and goes to heaven, and they find that it was a mistake and he has to go back to earth. So they turn him around and send him back. In the morning he comes to the shul, and they say, "Oh, listen, Chaim, what's happened? We just buried you like 3 days ago. What happened?" He says, "I don't know. I made it. I went to heaven. I was lucky to get to heaven, and they found there was a mistake. So send me back." And he said, "What? Did you talk to? Did you see that? What did you see?" Because I saw everybody. I saw Moshe, and I saw Aaron, and I saw God Himself, all the prophets, everything. So he said, "Listen, for years we're for years talking about which one is correctly. If the warning, if you give the warning, Gemara teaches, and the warning is such that it's not really a warning. Like if you do this sin, you might be punished. It's not really a warning because maybe punished, maybe only punished. Another one, if you do the things, you will be punished. And Reish Lakish is holding one way, and Rabbi Yochanan, his partner, is holding the other way. So which one is right? So he said, did you ask God? I said, I asked God this question. And God answered. He says, well, I have an answer for you. According to Rabbi Yochanan, it must be warning for sure. According to Rabbi Lachish, it must be only the questionable warning. That's the answer. That's a Judaism to you. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. People made God go crazy. So I think that you spoke about Rashi, and so I prepared right here on my phone. I prepared the page of Rashi's commentary on the first verse of the Torah. I think it would be wonderful to finish off this session, and so what does it say? It says, Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim v'et haaretz. This is the beginning. This is the beginning of Judaism. This is the beginning of the Torah. This is the beginning of Christianity, and this is the beginning of Islam. All our sister religions also, they accept this as their, Christianity comes out really from Judaism, and Islam is a third new religion that acknowledges the truth of the Torah, although it wants to replace it with a new set of rules, which are the rules of Islam. But anyway, this is the very basics, very fundamental basics of the three biggest religions. And Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim v'et haaretz. And when you listen, so in English it's in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. It's a very, very understandable. It's very direct kind of. There's not a problem to understand what this verse says. It says that in the beginning, God had created the heaven and the earth. But in Hebrew, it's a very, very strange verse. Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim v'et haaretz. I really like what the Rabbi Uri Sherki says about it. He says, I don't understand this verse. I don't understand even one word in this verse. It makes no sense. What does it mean? Bereshit bara. What is Yeshayahu Leibowitz says? Bereshit. Okay, the first word, Bereshit. So he says in Hebrew, Bereshit shel ma. In the beginning of what? Okay, in the beginning of what? Mm-hmm. So are we talking about the beginning of the universe? Or are we talking about a beginning of this world? Okay. Are we talking about the beginning of the earth itself? Or
before universe. Or even beginning of before universe. Something before universe, maybe.
Okay, but Rashi. So I don't want to get into Yeshayahu Leibowitz and Uri Sherki, but because both basically reference Rashi. And Rashi says this. I will read it in Hebrew and I will then translate it. Rashi says this. לא היה צריך להתחיל את התורה, אלא מהחודש הזה לכם. So basically he says the Torah should have begun with the first mitzvah, because the Torah itself, the entire thing, is about giving the Israelites their commandments of how to worship God. So, מהחודש הזה לכם, in the book of, I think it's called Numbers, right? Shmot is Numbers? Mm-hmm. Okay. אלא מהחודש הזה לכם, שהיא מצווה ראשונה שנצטוו בישראל, which is the first mitzvah that was given to the people.
Shmot is Exodus.
Shmot, that's Exodus, okay. So Rashi says, what the Torah should have been, if you think logically, should have begin with this month is for you, the first month, HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem, which is the first mitzvah that Israel was given, the people of Israel. So it says, so why Bereshit? Because koach ma'asav igid le'amo latet lahem nachalat goyim, just to show the power of God for giving them a country of many nations. Okay, and if those nations, because the land of Israel was given, and it's written in the Torah, was given to the land of Israel, to the people of Israel by God, and there were other 7 nations living on this land. And so if the nations of the world will tell the Israelites that they have occupied, this is very actual right now today, right? It's a topic that still haunts us today. If the nations of the world will tell you that you guys are occupiers and thieves, that you have taken the land of great 7 nations, great 7 goyim. So what do the people of Israel answer? The people of Israel answer that the entire earth, right, the land itself, is owned by no one. It's owned by God, and by His will, He gives it to one nation, and then He takes it and gives it to another nation, and then He gives it to the Israelites. And if He wants to punish us, He will give it to other nations as well. So, in other words,
behave.
In other words, we Jews, we better behave. But basically, God is the only one who has the power to do with the land what He wants. It doesn't. This is Rashi. It's not me. It's not left-wing Israel politicians. It's Rashi. So
not the same thing wrong with left wing.
God is the owner. There is no owner. You cannot claim ownership over a land. It's impossible. It's impossible. It's like, John Lennon in this song Imagine, right? Imagine all the people living life in peace, and imagine there's no countries, right? Imagine there is no what. So we can somehow relate it to what Rashi says, okay? Because so imagine there's no countries, because all people accept that God is the owner of His creation. And the fact that you are here doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything, because you can be there tomorrow.
Amen.
And we Jews are a very good example for that. I would say unfortunately, but if that's God's will, then there's nothing I can do about it. So the entire thing is about the power of God. And so the second word, bara, it's translated into English as created. Okay, created. But that's not what this word means, because this word is not even in Hebrew, it's in Aramaic. And today, we almost don't use that word in Hebrew, but our cousins, the sons of Ishmael, the Arabs and Muslims, they use this word a lot, but in its original sense, because barra in Arabic is get out.
Mm-hmm.
So Bereshit bara, in the beginning, get out. That's what it means. That's what the Torah says. What does it mean? What do you think, Lev?
I'm lost for thoughts and words. Maybe we should continue next time with it, because you open up a lot of interesting ideas.
This verse, this very first verse of the Torah, is mind-boggling. It's and the entire creation story, when you think about it. I will just end with this. Rashi says that Bereshit bara. Ein hamikra hazeh omer ela darsheni. So in order to understand this, you have to go to the Midrash. כמו שדרשו רבותינו, בשביל התורה שנקראת ראשית דרכו. So, for the Torah, which is called the beginning of his way, the beginning of his path. And for ובשביל ישראל שנקראו ראשית תבואתו. And for Israel, who are the beginning of his תבואתו, the beginning of his crop. The beginning of his crop. Because the word bereshit is actually also in Hebrew doesn't make any sense, because it should be bareshit. There is no such thing as bereshit. It doesn't exist in Hebrew. It's a mistake. Bereshit is a mistake, but it's not a mistake. It's a linguistic mistake. Bereshit in biblical, because this is biblical Hebrew. So in biblical Hebrew, bereshit means for the beginning. For the beginning, God took out the heaven and the earth. That's the literal. That's the literal meaning. It's
so interesting because I heard the drash. I heard the explanation of what Breshit from none other than my wife, and she got an excellent exposition to this word. She broke it down by every letter, and she demonstrated the entire Torah is in the word Breshit.
Yeah.
I don't know if should I ask her to do that, or maybe we should do it in the next lesson. We will start with that.
Yeah, maybe it would be great. It's one of the most important, because what basically the conclusion is that there is no conflict. There is no conflict between science and religion. It's an illusion. If science says that the world, the physical world, with all of our mathematical tools, mathematical and computers and everything, sorry, not mathematical tools, mechanical tools, right? All the technology that we have, if our science says that over and over again that the world was created probably 15 billion years ago, that's fine. There's no problem with that, because the Torah doesn't even speak about it. It's not.
I will just touch also when you mentioned, very interesting. Now that we kind of started Breshit, you just started the Breshit essential on this. I will mention. I ask my wife to get us elucidation of what Breshit, but I remember, now with the first parsha, chast in Russian, or part in English, parsha in Hebrew of Breshit, the first book of Moses, first of 5 books of Moses, first book of Moses. And it's interesting that when the snake trying Eve to eat the forbidden fruit, Eve said that God told them, you cannot eat from the fruit, from a tree of life, of tree of knowledge, I'm sorry. And Eve said, he told us not to eat from fruit of knowledge and touch it. God never said it, touch it. So Midrash says that snake pushed her against the tree and nothing happens, you see? Oh, nothing happened to you. Oh, I guess if that's the case, maybe I can eat it too. But that's besides the point. The point is, from there, Midrash derives that science is great. We're not against the science. It's just you can touch it, just don't eat it. Don't become obsession. Don't think the science is a solution for everything. Remember the quick joke that the God says, listen, people tell the God, you don't need us anymore, go home. And God says, well, if you don't need me anymore, I can leave. They say, listen, we have technology. We can synthesize everything, and science is advanced. We don't need to believe in you. And God says, fine, but would you mind the final little things? If you say you can do everything, I can, okay, I'm going to go home. I'm going to leave. You live without me. If you can do without me, fine. I'm happy for you. But just do one thing. Can you, I made you. I made a man. Can you do the man? Yeah, we have centrifuges, and we have biological composition. We can do any genetic call you want. How do you want us to do it? So just do it the way I did, from the dust. And they say, oh, from the dust, no problem. Can you do it right now? Yeah. Let me go get some dust. And God says, hold it. Take your own dust. Use your own dust. This is mine. So
Right,
let's finish
right.
this. It's interesting that our first lesson, this is miracle happened the very first lesson. It's been an hour. We usually like 30 minutes. It's been an hour with
Yeah.
no interruption. I don't know why. I don't know why. But we'll say we will continue next Tuesday again, which will be the 23rd of November 2021 at 8 o'clock in the evening Israeli time, 1 o'clock American time, or whatever Australian, Russian time you can calculate. And I would finish one thing. You mentioned John Lennon from Beatles saying, "I wish all the people living for today." George Harrison also, another part of the Beatles, to say, "Really want to see you, sweet Lord." Well, George Harrison, "I really want to see you." I mean, I can't sing it that good. So Beatles had something about God. John Lennon, Harrison was a very religious guy, actually. John Harrison was a very religious guy. So, okay,
Yeah,
on
but
this, we're going
it
to,
depends on what God. Yeah.
depends on what definition. You're right. All right. Today is Tuesday, so Shavua Tov, Хорошей недели, good week, and we'll meet again next Tuesday, 8 o'clock
Next
in
week.
Israel time. Send us your comments. You don't have our phone numbers and emails, but figure out how to do it. So we'll talk to you, all of you guys, on next Tuesday, 8 o'clock Israeli time. We'll continue with Brishit. Bye.
Bye bye.
Shalom.